Welcome to the Automate Construction Podcast. I'm here with Ali Hashemi, who'll be joining me in a minute, and we're going to talk about his company, TRS Tech. He's the founder and CEO, where they recently just completed printing, I believe, 7 buildings in Iran, and they hope to continue printing many more. They've been developing this tech for many years, improving it along the way, posting great updates on LinkedIn. And Ali is the founder of many different companies, so we'll get to talk about a whole suite of industries today. It'll be an awesome conversation. Make sure you stick around for the whole thing. Hey, Ali, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. It's good to see you again. It's been
Good
years.
to see you again too. A couple of years.
So you've just completed printing. I've seen on LinkedIn 7 new buildings.
Yeah, so far 7. There's a few more to go. But
Two
yeah,
more to
so
go.
far
So
we're
9
at
in
7.
total.
Yeah. So it's actually that there are two connected 100-meter buildings. So that's why it's 7. There's 2 more there remaining, and then we have another project already booked in.
Excellent. And so have you seen from project 1 to project 7 you're on now, and then the 2 more after that, improvements, many changes from that?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. You see some of the materials, for example, when the humidity is below 6%, you have to change a few things. We didn't really pick that up. That was one. We worked a bit more on precision. We tested a whole bunch of things here. I'm still trying to test out new things. We've built quite a few already, but still testing and tweaking things out.
Mm-hmm. So humidity is one of the big factors, and you're printing 2 in 1 envelope. Is that the same project as I just released a video on?
I have no idea what you released a video on. I haven't seen anything.
The video I did with Habib El Rahman in Dubai.
No.
They also printed 2 buildings in 1. You're in Iran, though, right?
In Iran, yeah. So it's
okay,
different.
Cool. Similar project.
Yeah. So it's different. It was a good experience. We went to the desert. It's like completely burnt. It's like 50 degrees. Right? So
like Texas.
Yeah. So we weren't expecting some of the challenges that came our way. Like, the water got cut off in the middle of the day, and then you're stuck with curing. Right? And then
I was just about to ask, you said the day, so you're printing during the day.
No, we're printing at night.
Okay, right? Good.
It's impossible to print it. Anything over 34 degrees, I think it's just not a good idea.
They do it in Texas, but I gotta say, it doesn't look like a good idea all the time when I see it.
Yeah, unless they have some additives which is solving that problem, I wouldn't suggest it at all. We tried it once. And we failed miserably. The other problem we have in areas where you have high temperatures in the day, the change in temperature during the night is drastic as well. And then the variation of temperatures causes cracking. So you have a number of problems to deal with usually.
Yeah, almost every building I've seen has cracking, but usually there's some kind of backfill or rebar, so it's not a concern.
Yeah, so we managed to actually deal with the cracking pretty well here. I was impressed with our work here. Unlike the last project, which we had some serious cracks, this time we played around a bit with our mix design, and the cracks were cracks, but they were minimal. And most of the cracks were because the curing guys in the daytime were being lazy. So we stay up at night, and I sneak up on them at in the daytime to see if they're actually curing it. Because I think that's one of the major issues that most of the companies don't talk about. The curing is as important as a print is. And there needs to be automation in that process. There's no automation right now properly to cure this thing. Right? And chemical curing with additives does not work as well as water. So we have to come up with a method where we don't waste too much water at the same time, while we're also making sure that it's constantly remaining moist and there's no change in temperature in the process. So I think that's something that needs to be worked on.
Do you know the cost of water there?
I actually don't, but it's too cheap for me to care. Right? That's good. It's good and bad because then you just waste water. Right? I think it's great where it's expensive, so you keep the other thing we should look into is, do we need drinkable water on this? Right? Do we really need to waste water on this, or can we use recycled water from other areas and use it in this? It would be a good thing to look into. It's something I'd want to look into the next year or so.
Yeah, certainly. That's fascinating. it's I don't know much about clean water. I assume that if it's cheap, that means that it's abundant and there's a lot of it everywhere, right?
Well, sometimes that's what it means. Like energy is very cheap here. It doesn't mean it's abundant. It's just
Okay,
the way the society's kind of organized.
got it.
Yeah.
So the printing you've done over the past, I mean, you started working on this technology, was it 5 years ago?
2019, 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
Right? And then about 2020, we started printing houses. Right? We had a few good successful stories, and then there were a few hiccups. My close friend, who was also the CEO, he passed away. He got
Sorry to hear
lung
that.
cancer. So
What year?
that he passed away last year, 1 year and a half ago. But he got cancer. He was very sick for like 2 years. We were behind a bit because of that, and a bit because we didn't see many of the problems. There's a lot of propaganda with 3D printed houses, right? So they don't tell you the actual whole story. You have to get into it. You have to build things outside. It's not like building in the warehouse. Anybody who's built in the warehouse and hasn't built that, they don't know what they're talking about. They have about 30% of the experience of what you're going to face when you get outside with the numerous variables you have to deal with. Right? So we dealt with those. And then when I realized this issue, I was like, you know what? I better shut up and fix these issues, and then and then make some kind of marketing efforts, right? So we've worked on it a lot. We printed a number of houses, and now we feel comfortable that we're at a place where we can go out and build almost anywhere. Still, we have problems. I'm not saying we don't, but we're comfortable. We're comfortable with this being a method of construction now.
Hmm.
Took a couple
Yeah,
of
that's
years.
awesome. And so the printer you're using, you developed yourself.
Yes, the printers are developed by ourselves. Printers, material, software we're still working on. I want to make some tweaks with the software where I can automate, one section to be printed 5 layers and automatically go to that section that I want it to go to. So when we, for example, have horizontal rebar, we don't have to waste time running after the damn printer, right? We can print 5 layers here, then put the rebar there, and again move on slowly and gradually. We haven't achieved that fully yet. It shouldn't be too difficult. I also want to work on some AI error handling, which will be interesting. Um,
Yeah.
which will take some time, but I think we can do something with it.
There was a big conversation in the Middle East about someone, I believe it was someone in Iran wanted to do a 5,000 home project of 3D printed homes, and they were shopping that around to different companies, getting quotes for. It might have been a different country. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are talking about it here. So what I've seen myself, they use our company and they come to us to say if we get your project, and then they go market on our behalf, right? There's nobody
They
else
take
here.
your videos and they
They
show it
take
to
our
someone
bid.
else. They say, "Look what we could do."
Look what we can do, right? So we've signed a 3,000 house contract already, right?
Wow!
Uh,
Congratulations.
thank you. But how that's going to be given to us, how gradually that will, it's unclear at this stage. But the contract's been signed. So let's see where we can go from here. I want to test out 3 floors. And I'm also wanting to take a big risk where I think we could do 5 floors if we make the material lighter, reduce the density, use the printer as foam work, right, rather than load bearing walls. And it's possible. I'm not sure what will happen, but I think it's something I'd like to play with a little bit.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You see in some skyscrapers, they have concrete where it's thicker at the bottom, and then each column is seemingly getting thinner at the top, so you're
Right.
saving a little material.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah.
really cool. So the before the 7 buildings you're printing now, was there a hiatus between projects, or were you printing other buildings before that consistently?
We were not consistent all the time. We have a number of projects that are in the pipeline where we're getting the permissions from the city council to build. So we have, well, I purchased a bit of land myself. I was like, you know what, I'm not waiting around. So there was an issue with some people thinking that this is, for cheap housing, right? So then I bought a piece of land, which, is going to be kind of luxurious market. I think we can do that too.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah, so I tried to play around with that, but in the middle of all of this, we worked on different parts of the printer. We worked on a new extruder. The double nozzle is coming soon. I hope
Yeah, that's
if
really
this
cool.
works out. If that works out, I think I'm not sure, but I think we should be able to get done with 100 meters in 24 hours. 24 hours of printing, of course, right?
What do you think today are the biggest challenges to getting the cost down?
Well, getting the cost down is, I think there's a lot of hidden costs in this. Right. So, for example, one of the issues is going to be the supply chain. The supply chain is not ready for this at this point, at least not where I am. I'm pretty sure it's worse over there, right? Because if you remember last time I told you that, hey, concrete, you're saying that this is not a viable, financially viable. It's not cheaper, and I challenged you then, and I realized why I said that because I didn't know the prices of cement where you guys are. Here, it's very cheap. So here, this is a very feasible project over here. The problem we have over here is that the human resources are so cheap that getting rid of human resources means nothing.
Ah, yes.
Like it's like okay,
For
reducing
the
two
viewer,
people.
I think maybe 75% of people don't know the difference between concrete and cement. So the concrete is the finished mix, and the cement is like the glue part of the ingredient. It's limestone, and it's the one of the most expensive parts of the ingredients. With 3D printed concrete, you usually use more cement, so it's more sensitive to the cement cost. So in the U.S., when the cement's the most expensive ingredient, doubling the cement ratio doubles the concrete cost. But if you don't have double the cost of, like, if your cement and sand are an even cost or both are cheap, then maybe you have a lower material cost.
Well, it all depends on the energy prices of every country, right? Cement is highly tied to energy prices. So
Okay.
once they spike, then you're going to have more expensive prices for cement as well. Here, because energy prices are quite cheap, electricity is quite cheap. Therefore, they keep the cost of cement down as well, and therefore it becomes feasible from the aspect of the materials. But the human resources, it's more of an issue of management over here rather than cost. It's very difficult to manage the labor force. There's a shortage of it in many instances, but it's a management rather than cost. Over there, I would assume if you cut down a few of the people who are, a few of the laborers and so forth, that's a considerable amount, right? The other issue that I've noticed is that how many mess ups you have on a project, right? How many times you have faulty equipment, how many times, your pump gets stuck. Right? We had one instance that, this one poor guy, he was a laborer. He had a what do you call that? I forget the English term for it. Um, the dig thing you dig with. What do you call it?
Shovel.
Shovel. Yeah, shovel. Right. He put the shovel in the pump accidentally. He was tired. He forgot
I know.
it. So these kind of issues happen every once in a while,
I
particularly
hope no one
because
got hurt.
nobody got hurt. Our pump got hurt, so it took time to to fix that. But because it's a new product, it's a new set of processes. It takes time for people to kind of avoid these common mistakes that should really be avoidable. Right? A simple thing like standing on the energy chain of the rail. Now that should be a given, but it's new. They don't know. The poor guys, he's a laborer. He's not done this before. So those kind of mistakes happen, which delay the process. And as you end up staying there for more than like let's say a few days, if you're 3 4 days, um, if your project takes 3 4 days longer than expected, your cost. I've actually calculated the cost increment cost per day. So after a certain point, it becomes the same cost as other projects, and then you start losing money. So you have to make sure that your logistics, and your human resource and your technicians are there on the site to make sure they can resolve any problems that come about.
Most of those delays usually come from the people. So I guess the long term vision is that with automation, you reduce the need for people, and so there's just if you reduce the room for human error.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, but some of them are just difficult, like the hosing, right? The guy who has to pull the hose. That is the most irritating part of part of things. You've got this entire massive machine printing automatically, and then you have some dude like with a hose pulling it down and pushing it back up so it doesn't hit the layers that you've printed.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think.
not 100% convinced there's a labor hours reduction. The labor seems much easier than lifting cinder blocks by hand. It's not back-breaking labor. It can be done by like smaller men or women too, and it's uh, more like mental work. So people in like it attracts young people to it. It's easier to hire people, but I'm not 100% convinced that it's less human hours put in yet, just because there are so many things that pop up.
Well, I think when you talk about wooden framing, I don't think there's any major change, right? But when you're working with concrete houses or masonry houses here, I think there's a bit of a change. It's a lot easier. I really do believe in this. Is my personal experience. I mean, I think this will be if it's if it continues in the trajectory that it is, and the problems that continue to that they're going to be resolved, this will be something like the iPhone. Nobody's going to bother with human resources to put things in place. And if you remember back in the days when these smartphones came, people were reluctant to like, what the hell is this? But now we won't go back to the Nokia. This has the potential to reach that. From my experience in printing, because even though we're on site, most of the time we're bored. We're chatting, we're doing nothing, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reality of the iPhone is that Apple has a bunch of suicide nets around their Foxconn factory in Taiwan. So I don't think we want to end up like that,
No,
just
no,
hiding the hardware parts. But
that aspect of it, I don't want to. I'm not trying to compare, but the aspect of
I
the
love
fact,
my iPhone, but it,
yeah.
yeah,
The aspect that I'm referring to is that it's just easier. It's easier once things are running, right? And I'm sure these glitches will be taken care of over time. It's not. They're nothing major.
yeah, I agree. The improvement arc is there, and the companies like yours, TRS Tech, that are implementing digital construction on site are the companies that are going to be able to take advantage of whatever innovation, whether it's your company that comes out with the next printer, or maybe it's even a humanoid robot that all of a sudden you can feed the data that you've accumulated, both in terms of you have cameras, you're collecting data on concrete, everything you're doing on site, just having people who know how to do construction and work with robotics. All those things are so much value, even if everything changes 180 degrees.
I agree. I exactly. Even if another company does it, it's not very difficult for us to incorporate that, right? Because we've got all the groundwork done. We've done all the hard work now.
Mhm.
We built about 20 houses, which is not much in the large scale of things,
It's a
but it's
lot.
good practice. It's been good practice.
I think that puts you in the top 20 companies in the world in terms of number of houses completed 3D printed. There's not a lot that have done that many, and out of
Yeah.
400 companies.
There's 400 now.
I've counted 400 companies that either are trying to print or say they're going to print, but the number that actually achieve one home is maybe 10% of that, or at this point maybe 20% of that have printed one house, permitted or not permitted.
I think we were the fifth company that actually got the tech as
Wow.
well. So we're quite old.
Yeah, remember Kazakh Construction?
Yes, cause of construction. I remember Icon was just a tiny little company with a strong marketing team. I was like, who the hell are these guys? And now they've kind of expanded, I guess.
Yeah, by the time I first got to do a video with Icon in 2020, it was they were already at $1 billion valuation. So I was a little late to the party, but 2 years before that, I met up with Apis Core in Boston, applying for a job with them. I was hoping to start on the project they were going to do in Louisiana, but the project never happened. Uh, and then a year later, I started the channel. But
I'm surprised Apis Core hasn't taken off more than it has. And I'm impressed with their work.
yeah,
I think they can get places.
it's hard to build a printer from scratch, like
Yeah.
they also built their printer from scratch, and so that's a big process. They've pivoted in terms of their business model, selling printers or renting printers, and they're really now trying to operate stuff themselves and like dial it in, kind of maybe similar to the way you're doing. And they got the building in Melbourne that looks pretty nice. I visited that while it was printing. Um, it's just they have customers that have been on the waiting list for 3 years that are still waiting for the printer. So hopefully they can. All I want to see is everybody expand fast.
I don't think it will happen too fast at this stage, but once a few of the glitches are dealt with, I think there'll be an explosion all of a sudden. And I think a lot of it will have to do with the materials. It's the
Yeah,
materials. This is a materials game. Robotics is difficult. I see some people, they build some tiny printer, and they think it's the same as building a 20 meter wall. It's not. They're two different things. The accuracy and the errors you get with accumulating length is phenomenal. It's unfortunately quite difficult to deal with. That aspect still is doable. The problem we have still is with the materials. The materials, the way that we have to get away from the amount of cement we're using. I think once that happens, I think things will change drastically. And I think once we have lighter weight materials as well. Right now, the density is about 2,300. Right. I think even if we get to 1,600, 1,700, we can comfortably look at building 3, 4 floors. At least in this part of the world, which will be quite useful, where majority of the buildings are 3 to 5.
Hmm.
So
So your background, you're kind of like the Elon Musk of Iran. You've done a lot of different startups in different industries, and you've done
yeah.
you have a long list of companies that you started, right?
Yes, if you remember, we talked about the avian flu back in those days, right? So we developed the vaccine for COVID-19, a proper vaccine, not no genetic material, something which is safe and has decent
Nice.
efficacy as well.
I like that.
I don't trust any governments forcing some medicine down my throat. I don't appreciate that, and particularly a type of vaccine which hadn't been tested before. If you remember back in those times, I was complaining about it back then as well, and then all of a sudden the people started making a bit of noise about it. So we've developed a vaccine which we know to be safe. It's something that we didn't develop from scratch. That method has been around, and we worked on that. It has a few benefits to it. And now I was hoping to continue to work on the avian flu, but unfortunately I'm not able to at this stage. I can't take on any more projects. I'm already drowning. Right. So that was one aspect of our work. The other aspect, if you remember, we were doing the asphalting, which I had to. It was a failed project from my behalf because we couldn't maintain the liquidity of the company, so I had to close that down. But it was a good experience nonetheless. We worked on AI as well. Even and back then, I think we had the discussion about the AI back then as well before ChatGPT came out. So we've developed an AI for the judiciary. So it's a deterministic AI for law, for legal issues, right? So you have common law and you have civil law. With civil law, there's a bit more uh, clear, predefined laws, whereas common law is more about precedents, right? So in the systems of civil law, at the very least, we developed predefined algorithms which will tell you your ruling within a minute or so, right, or
By
2 minutes or
looking at all
whatever.
the past precedent.
That would be for common law. This doesn't even require the past precedents. The past
Wow.
precedents it can work as well. However, the only in places where the laws are obvious, they don't have ambiguity. For example, if you have criminal law, you have to figure out the intent. That's not something an AI can do very easily, right? Or, for example, in some countries like New Zealand, you have fairness is something that the judge has to look into. That's something that I'm not sure. At least I don't know whether the AI will be able to pull that off or not. But anywhere where there's precise, clear, defined rulings and laws, the AI is very quick. In any countries where you have a shortage of judges, like here, we have 11,000 uh, judges, and you have millions of complaints coming through. They're not able to handle it. So this will hopefully reduce the amount of complaints that come through, and also reduce the time that a judge requires to deal with an issue. So, and we'll be releasing that in a month. We've already released part of it, less than a month, hopefully. That will be released as well. Just I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's pretty useful.
Yeah, that's fascinating. A lot of interesting stuff going on every field you can think of.
Yeah, the world's changing pretty quickly.
I wish we still had the last time we talked. I don't know. I thought that it was supposed to be a podcast. We had maybe an hour and a half conversation. It was amazing. I wish it was a podcast, but I think I forgot to hit record or something. This time it's
Yeah,
definitely recording. But
yeah,
we lost that
that was a
amazing
good
conversation.
conversation. You've grown a lot since then. I checked your follower. You're at 300,000. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, it's grown a lot of shorts. So since then, I've switched from prioritizing the horizontal videos to the vertical videos, and that's where everybody's attention is at these days. People only have a minute.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, unfortunately. We should do a project together about the costing, a comparative study for the costing of 3D printers. I'll send my whole team on there. Uh, and then you could get the data from there. I'll get data from here. We can come up with a small little project. I think that would be quite interesting.
Yeah. What? Let's do that. What data would you like to compare?
I mean, you'd have to figure out, simple prices of the types of sand that are generally used, aggregates that are used, cement, for example, human resources, some basic things. I've actually made an outline for it already, just to fill it in. I'm going to do a comparative study that, this versus wooden frame versus concrete houses, the pros, cons, benefits, and costing. And where does it no longer become economically feasible, right?
Yeah, the
Where it's
most accurate way to do it would be to compare your costs locally, like the cost to build whatever the traditional method is in the region that you're 3D printing a house.
Of course.
But the most useful thing for the audience would be comparing something that's applicable to everybody in the world. So
Yeah.
there's some balance where maybe we can compare like separately the labor hours and the material costs.
Yeah, something like that. I think we would come up with something quite interesting. Also, the type of roof that we're using. You'd have to, because one of the issues is, are you going to use a truss? Are you going to, what type of materials are you using? What are you comparing with each other? I think that's where a lot of the discussion is lost. Right? We don't know whether we're comparing the same things. We don't know if we're comparing the same quality. So, for example, some person from, I won't mention the country, had a project there. They said, "Oh, we can build this cheap," and I looked at their house, dude. Look, I could blow on this and this will fall down. Right? You can't compare that with this. So we have to figure out what we're actually comparing together, whether it's also in a seismic load is necessary to take into consideration or not. All these factors have to be. We have to have some predefined criteria, and then based on that predefined criteria, I think one or two to start with, then we can move on and expand from there.
What's your structural schedule like? Are you doing columns every 2 meters or so?
It depends on the mix design. So if we're at 70 megapascals, for example, yeah, it's about 2 meters. If we're a bit lower, like this print over here, we're about 1.2 meters.
Mhm.
So it's somewhere between this. 1.2, sometimes 1.2 meters to, but when we do 1.2 meters, we have a smaller rebar, right? So right now, as it's load bearing, I want to try to use it as foam work rather than load bearing.
Yeah.
See, because you can come up with more interesting designs, I think. Right. With load bearing walls, you're kind of limited a little bit in terms of length and shape that you can use, particularly because of the roofing that we're using as well.
It's true, but if you can be structural, you're reducing the cost of more and labor too after the print.
Agreed.
I don't know.
Agreed. But I want to try a few different types of methods so that if we need to, for example, build some interesting shapes that would require some type of some type of columns, I'd like to be. I'd like to have practiced that out. That's
How big is your team now?
still small. You don't need too many people. It's how good your people work. We've had to let go of a few people. We have about 24 to 30 people on and off. It's not a big
Not
team.
very small.
Yeah, for this company. Overall, the company as a whole is about 200 people. But
Wow.
the printing team is we're at 30 or so, roughly. That's excluding labor.
How many square feet or square meters a year do you guys build?
Well, we've only built roughly 20 houses. So, and they're all...
But that's 20% of the company. When you talk about the whole company, you guys do other construction projects, right?
Oh, the construction projects we do are a lot more. We have another technology as well for construction. We discussed it last time, AAC, which is lightweight concrete, right? Mm-hmm. So we built quite a bit. Our partners have built, for example, the largest hospital in the country.
Wow.
So I don't know the exact meters, but we built quite a bit.
So you're manufacturing lightweight concrete in a factory and delivering it on site for assembly?
Yep. So it's 60 centimeters in width. 25 centimeters in I guess that's the width, right? And you can do the panels they have rebar in them. So it's 1, 2, or 3 layers depending on what you're trying to do. So they're load bearing as well. They can be load bearing. And basically the height that we can do is somewhere between 3 meters to 6 meters. So 6 meters is a little tough, but yeah, it's doable. We've done it.
And that's how that hospital was built?
The hospitals was traditionally.
Okay.
Yeah. The hospital started 5 years ago, so it's nothing.
So when you compare the lightweight concrete modular system to 3D printed concrete, how does that compare in your mind?
Well, at first, I'll be honest, I thought the lightweight concrete was much better. Right. But as I progressed with a 3D printer and I realized how many processes can be actually cut out, I'm in love with a 3D printer. Without trying to exaggerate anything, I think this is awesome. So, for example, simple things. For example, you're building one. What I'm trying to do is before I bring the main printer, I want to bring a smaller printer to do the foam work of the actual footing of the foundation. That would save a lot of headache because at that time, one of the biggest issues you had, we have to get an as built of the rebar before we start printing, right? If you're doing the footing, the foam work with the printer, you don't need an as built drawing anymore. Right? That saves one process, one headache off. Then you come and then while you're printing, what we do is we leave like a recess wall. You should probably be able to pick it up in the pictures or the videos for the utilities. So we already have the spaces ready. We cut out when we have the time at the very least. And a couple of our meeting at the time, we cut out the places where we need to put the electricals in, right? So everything's ready. That's a process, right? That's a headache. Why is it a process? You need to find another team unless you're hiring everybody full time to do this with yourself. You need to find those subcontractors to get these small jobs. That unnecessary stress that that accumulates. I think that's where this is helping. Then so you have the recesses and the recess walls ready, and then the lintel is very easy with a 3D printer, right? It doesn't take much time at all, right? And then on top of that, when we get to the roofing, especially with our type of roofing, which is flat, right? The foam work of the roofing is done with the 3D printer as well. So we go 30 centimeters up from one side, which saves another process of having to do the foam work with and place the molds at a particular height, which is just a headache. In many instances, you need scaffolding, so you don't need that anymore, right? So it reduces a lot of processes like that. So from that aspect, I think the printer is much better, right? However, the printer requires a certain type of expertise that doesn't. That's just one guy coming and putting a laser, making sure it's aligned and moving on, putting some glue that's used, a particular type of glue. It's very simple, labor, a little bit labor intensive, but there you need a crane all the time. So either you have to purchase a bunch of cranes. We don't have to do that. We just need it for a few hours. So each one has its benefit, and this one has better R rating, the AAC, than the printers for sure, and of course better for sound as well because of the pockets of air. But I still love the printer. I'm a bit biased. You're asking the wrong guy. I think
that's very, very honest takes. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. So I still really do believe the printer has the ease that it's going to bring to the market is going to change everything. And we're not far away from it at all. We're very close.
And it keeps getting better.
It keeps getting better. Yeah.
How is shipping the lightweight concrete units? Do they get damaged in shipping?
They do. So they're brittle, so at the top edges, but we bring the rebar right to the edge. So if that does happen, then what we do is we have plaster and the glue that I'm talking about. The compressive strength of that is quite high. So we did make a mix and we kind of fix it up again. The compressive strength of that mixture is higher and stronger than the actual brittle concrete. So it solves the problem.
Yeah.
But it is a headache. And more than a headache, when people see these things, when they see something so lightweight, particularly in a size, we're in a size, there's a lot of earthquakes here, right? They don't understand. They don't understand. They think this is fragile and it'll break. It's actually better. There's less inertia. It's better for earthquakes. But it's difficult to get this across to people.
20 by 60 centimeters is like maybe this big, right? So how heavy is that?
The density is 550. It's very light.
I don't know what that means.
That means it's 1/4 of the weight of concrete.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So 1/4, it's quite light. So one panel, which is about 4 meters high in height and 25 centimeters thick, 60 centimeters in width, should be around about 180 kilograms.
Still quite heavy.
It is heavy. You need a crane for sure. You definitely need a crane because it has rebar inside it. Right? So
someone could lift it. If you do enough deadlifts, but you don't want to do that.
We've developed simple, small mechanisms to lift, right? We're working on that. A small, tiny machine that'll just lift it and, to help push it in place. So It's useful. It's something that has a lot of benefit in places where there's a lot of heat or cold, I guess, but here's more.
Yeah, I think long term you might see a solution where you're using a combination of your digital construction tech with maybe you have humanoid robots building your lightweight concrete panels or something like
I
that in the future.
tried. I tried building a humanoid. I failed miserably, but I'll give I'll give it another shot.
You always try to do everything yourself.
No, no. I mean, with our company, it was fun. I do it for fun. I one responsibility I enjoy. We have a short life. We're getting old. My weird beard's getting wet. It was black back last time we spoke, right? It's a short life. 20 years left. I want to do something useful before I leave this place, right?
Yeah, I feel that way too. Got to do interesting stuff.
Interesting stuff. Number two, I enjoy it. I love it. I love creating new things. I love coming up with new ideas. Crazy ideas in my head all the time. Every time I get some extra spare money, I'll go make something new. You fail a lot, though. That's the problem with these startups, right? There's a lot of failures, right, before you get to a product that works.
I can definitely relate to that. Why wouldn't you buy one of the like Unitree humanoid robots from China or something? They're like $16,000.
I might, but I find that insulting. I want to do it myself. Right? So we did a pretty decent job, but it's the sensory feedback that's difficult. It was difficult back then, right? So
Yeah.
that's a challenge. We have decent AI right now, which can help, but we're still a long way before we can get the sensory feedback. Our bodies are amazing. We know how much we're about to fall, how much pressure. The sensory feedback does. It's a miracle, right? So that has to be worked on in more detail before we look at humanoid robots. We have better mechanical structures than humans, right? For the technology that we currently have. And the second problem is the batteries. How are you going to provide energy for that thing over long periods of time? It's not
Yeah,
easy.
definitely lots of problems, and I'm not an engineer, so I don't know how to solve them. But when I just think about it very simply, everything is designed for people to do. So if you have a person-shaped tool, that's the tool that can do all the stuff that people can do.
Agreed, but the precision that's required for that is very difficult
Yeah,
to come up with.
yeah,
Right? We're engineers. It's a cheap imitation of nature what we do, right? Nature is beyond amazing. So these simple things that we take for granted, like that. Right now, I know my arm is falling. That the robot doesn't know that. Right? You have to make it understand. You have to make your robot understand where it is, how far it is from the ground, how far it is. These are not that simple to uh, deal with on a large scale for all different variables that are around. You'll get like 100 variables done, then you have five others you never thought of, right? So they'll be resolved over time, but I don't think we're that close to the humanoid
yeah. A lot of people have
reconstruct.
like a PINDAR or LiDAR or laser sensor to measure the distance, but usually they have that reported back to a person with a tablet rather
Exactly.
than the robot itself having awareness and being able to manipulate the digital file. Like the robot can't take that information and change the G code based on that information without human input. And so if you can delete that step, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, we'll get there, but I'm not sure how good that's going to be for us as humans, right?
Interesting.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's a good idea to make us lazier than we've already become, right? Our attention spans of these kids that I see is like, as you said, 1 minute, 30 seconds. This is not where we should be going, I think. I think there needs to be some type of mechanism to make up for this loss of human intelligence exercise, if I can call it that, right? That loss is not healthy. Right? I don't want kids to be on AI trying to seek quick answers for everything because they can't be bothered picking up a book to read or listening to somebody.
It's true, but there's also the flip side. Like you get the short content going really popular, and then you have long form podcasts more popular than ever too. So there's some
I
like
agree.
on both sides, and some people are still reading a lot of books and stuff. So like you got the sheep and the lions, and that's just maybe how it's always been.
I agree. I agree. But I think what these kind of robots or these mechanisms will do it will give too much power to the hands in the hands of a small group of people. And I think that can be quite dangerous. I'm not worried about this matrix type of AI nonsense that goes. We're very far away from self-aware. I mean, that's a bit more of the fantasy, in my opinion, at
No, I
this.
agree with you 100%. And one of my favorite parts of the construction industry overall is the decentralization. So you don't really see one company taking over the whole construction industry. It's tons and tons, thousands of small family owned companies and small businesses in every state. The regulations are set up so that it's extremely difficult for one company to just take over the entire construction industry. And like you mentioned, the weather challenges, material challenges, everything is so different in every place. And 3D printing versus offsite is so much more decentralized because the contractor has their own printer. It's like $500,000 or $1 million, which is expensive, but not unheard of in the realm of construction equipment.
Yeah,
And so it's putting the power in the hands of the people rather than if you have a factory pumping out all tiny homes, then the power's only in the hands of whoever has the key to the $100 million factory.
exactly, exactly. But the humanoid robots or a fleet of robots that can, create themselves and multiply themselves, that would put power in the hands of a few people, which I don't think is healthy. We're already seeing the
It's
problems.
true.
Yeah.
I would
So
hope that there's at least one person like you in every country who will build their own humanoid robot so that it's decentralized and not all Tesla or all China or whatever the company is.
yeah, I actually want to open source even the printer soon. So I promised
Wow.
myself that the moment that I get enough contracts that I can start a new project with the money, I'm going to open source the printer. I'm going to give out the
Wow.
designs and everything and the material. Hopefully, it should be soon. I hope that 3,000 house contract will get us somewhere, and then I'll happily do that. And I want to do the same thing for the AI as well. I think
I'll
some
do
of
the
these
best
things,
I can.
yeah, a lot of this money can be made without trying to control everything. Right? What are we trying to control? We're all going to go in the grave in 20 years. I don't understand. I fail to understand the motivation behind trying to become a trillionaire, for example. Doesn't make any sense to me. It's good that we have the motivation to improve and move things forward, but after a certain point, I think it has no purpose considering we have to go into the earth after a little while, right? I mean, I don't understand. Maybe there's something I'm missing. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, I think it's just not less about like the number, more about what you're working on. So you just work on cool stuff, and if it works really well, helps a lot of people, the world tends to just give you more resources to do more bigger stuff.
I agree. That's also true. I agree. So, how's your podcast coming along? I haven't been following, unfortunately. I've been
I
missing.
haven't posted podcast episodes in a while, and I haven't recorded them in even longer. It's been maybe 6 months since I've recorded any podcast episodes, and I've been posting podcast episodes that I had in a backlog, been waiting to post for various reasons. But things are good. The shorts are doing well. It's always a different plot. Some weeks it's Instagram's doing well, some weeks it's TikTok, but uh, it's going well. I'm starting to like, I got a fish tank now, so I'm learning about different
Wow.
hobbies and trying to diversify my, I don't know. I've been following 3D concrete printing. Unlike you, I don't have so many different projects I'm working on. So I guess my mind got kind of stale, just always on one topic, one topic, one topic.
I told you back then your consistency is going to pay off, and it has. You were
Yeah,
at
it did. And
twenty
I
thousand. You were at 20,000 back then. Now you're at three hundred
was it.
thousand. Yeah.
I
So
had just got an apartment. I was 3 years into my journey when we did the call, and I was living out of my car for 2 years before that, and I had just got my first apartment in Houston, Texas, where I lived for 1 year, and then moved to Austin. I've been in Austin 2 years.
I also liked your 3D printed army ideas. I think that was pretty cool too. I was actually going to contact you for certain parts of consultation, but we solved it.
Yeah,
So
thanks. It's not consulting. It's all we do is help people with resumes. So we collect resumes from people who watch the videos. People who watch my videos, I think, are the most passionate people about in the 3D printed construction industry because I'm not that entertaining. So they're watching really because they love the technology and they want to see the printers moving and they want to work on it. So that's, in my opinion, the best place to source people from. And, we're not the most competitive recruiting firm because we don't work with anybody that's currently employed at a 3D printed construction company. Like the most competitive recruiting firms are good at headhunting. They'll go and find somebody who's the VP of technology at the competitor and they'll hire. I can't do that because I want to film the competitor and I want to like serve everybody. So I do non-exclusive agreements and I just source resumes and see how it works. But yeah, it's fun.
I'll probably be using it once we get out of this place. We're planning to expand, hopefully. And then
Yeah, cool. The other thing I'm starting to do is used equipment sales. So some people have like stuff they bought that they're not really using anymore, and I'll do like a 5% commission to sell it to my audience if you're not able to sell it on your own.
there's some equipment I want. I'll message you after the podcast.
Yeah, I think it could be great because there's so many people that want to get involved with the tech, but they don't have the $500,000 to buy brand new equipment themselves. And then there's people who want to buy a new $2 million printer, or build out a new printer who have the old one. Uh, cool stuff. But yeah, those things are good, and I'm just really excited to see. Like today, I have an awesome video coming out with a massive client. It should come out in a few hours as soon as they approve the article. I didn't write the article; it's like the Wall Street Journal or something. But there's good projects, and so I'm really excited about 3D printed construction, where it's going to go in the next year, 3 years, 5 years. People were disappointed when Icon completed their 100 home project and didn't start another 100 home project immediately. But there are still big projects coming down the pipeline. Like you said, 3,000 homes, that's going to be the biggest one in the world.
Yeah, I mean it's not one place. The 3,000 homes with the company, and well, they have to produce. I hope they do, but hopefully they will. But Icon, it's a question for me as well. I understand why Icon hasn't started another 100 house project, considering I think they purchased their own land last time.
I
Is
don't
that
know. I believe they were a subcontractor of Lennar. So Lennar is the top 5 home builder in the United States, and they printed on the Georgetown for the 100 home project was the Georgetown Lennar project on Wolf Ranch.
right? So if that's the case, they should have started something new. Why do you think it's been so slow in the states?
I think that it was more expensive than Lennar would build typically, and so they were not. I think Lennar was hoping it would be cheaper. People were hoping the economies of scale from 1 home to 100 homes would reduce the cost. I think if it did reduce the cost beyond what the cost of traditional construction is, then they probably would have started many more homes faster. But now instead, they're going back to the drawing board. They're working on the Phoenix printer. So they're workshopping. They don't want to expand the wrong technology. They want to like really make sure they get the details right before they go big, I guess.
But I think Icon would be perhaps expensive right now because of the precision of their prints. I haven't seen better prints than Icons at this stage. Have you?
Icon gets good quality prints. It's yeah. I don't know that I've seen anything better on site because when you see something really good, a lot of time the companies will print 100 days and send one video of the one best day that they had of the 100. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
what you see online, that's why I try to always go in person and get the one day of live footage. Another thing I'm doing expanding is working with international journalists. So I have this kid Habib El Rahman in Dubai who's a student, and maybe he would be able to visit you in person.
He's more than welcome. I'll happily fly him out. Anytime he's interested, let me know. I'll
Yeah,
fly him out.
cool. I'll let him know. Are Dubai citizens? They're able to travel to Iran, right?
Yeah, they should be able to.
Okay, I'll ask if he's up for it. Yeah, so I'm hoping with international journalists, it'll be easier to cover more projects. And there's all kinds of projects around the world. I've been only in America for the past couple of years, so uh, yeah.
I think where we're going to see a large change is that the fertility rate of the world has changed dramatically. So we're seeing a drop in fertility, and we're seeing an increase in divorce rates. So there's less labor force, while there's a more requirement for houses. Now this is going to happen for approximately, I assume, 30 years time, right? 20 to 30 years, where we're going to have small houses or a lot of, I don't know whether it's going to be small or not, I don't know. But there's going to be a lot of demand for houses and not enough, labor to actually fulfill that demand. In that 30-year period, there's going to be a lot of money to be made for automation. But then after that decline, and when the next generation comes, if the fertility rate doesn't increase, we're going to have a lot of empty houses after a period, I think. But for this 30 years, I think we're looking good.
It'll be interesting times. Hopefully, if there is really, it seems like people disagree. I agree with you that it seems like there's a fertility issue. Like there's not enough people to replace the population in the next generations, and I think that's a problem. But some people think that's a good thing, and they want less people. I don't know. Uh,
Well, whether they want less people, that's not the question. It's whether they want to live with the same living standards or not. You cannot maintain the same living standards with a decrease in population. But if they're ready for not having the kind of luxuries that are available right now, which even back in 1990s when I was younger, right, they weren't there, right? Many
Yeah.
of them at least. So if we're ready to deal with that issue, it's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with having a smaller population for a period and then increasing again. I don't think this is the first time this has happened. The cycle will continue. But yeah, I think we have to understand that a lack of workforce would really mean perhaps a lack of electricity every once in a while. It will probably mean your smartphones are either going to be extremely expensive or non-existent. Right? So many of the luxury items, the way that seem to be common items right now, will really become luxury items for
But
us.
what about all my YouTube subscribers?
That's the other problem, right? You'll lose a lot of people from the online market too.
Well, then they better keep making babies.
Well, that's the thing. I think people don't understand. The boomers are still alive, and this is the last generation for the boomers, the last decade, I assume. So that drop that we're about to experience is going to be sudden and dramatic, right? A lot of empty houses, a lot of inheritance moving certain places, a lot of change will be seen in this next decade. And then we have this new generation, which I kind of love them, but I also can't stand them at sometimes as well. But I love them because they're honest. They are what they are, right? I appreciate that. While at the same time, they're a very difficult bunch to deal with. That generation is then going to be the workforce. We're going to have a lot of fun then.
Yeah, I'm a very awkward age in between generations, so I don't really know where I fit in. But I guess I don't get to work with many young people, but I see some of them on different job sites and stuff. Uh, Most of the people I get to work with, because we're in such cool industries, the people I get to see are like they're hardworking, smart, intelligent, optimistic, doing cool stuff, just like you get to be surrounded by awesome people.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm optimistic about the next generation. Their honesty and their kind of the way they are, I think that's great. I think they just become a little bit lazy because of all the automation that they're taking for granted now.
Yeah, I one thing I really like about the next generation is they seem skeptical of the government. Like they don't trust what they're told
Finally,
necessarily.
finally, a generation that's skeptical of a handful of people thinking they can run the rest of us, which is good. That's what I meant. I didn't want to make this political, but that's what I was trying to get at really when I said
Yeah, sure.
they're straightforward.
Yeah, it's good. The I guess maybe they lose motivation when they see that they like things like 2020, 2021. It seems like they don't have independent control anymore. And when people feel like they don't have control, they get lazy, and they like you get some people that are like the lions who are like it motivates them and they want to build more and fight back. And then you get the sheep who are just like, oh, we can't do anything. We just have to. I don't know what sheep do.
Yeah, I guess I'm scared of this avian flu that's going to hit us again. So we're going to experience something of a similar nature.
I hope not. What do you know that I don't? Why are we getting an avian flu?
Well, the avian flu has been around for a long time. Even back then, if you remember, we were discussing a few years back. The main project was the avian flu, rather than COVID's like a baby virus. COVID death rate is 2%. The avian flu death rate with the current stats that we have is 30% to 60%, 50%, let's say, depending on the strain that we're dealing with. So the death rate is dramatically higher, though I hope that we missed a few asymptomatic, you know, people. I hope that the data changes as we find out more. But it's an extremely deadly virus. And now we're not ready for it. And then we have all this mistrust in vaccines because of what they threw out last time and what they did last time. I'm a little bit concerned about this. Hopefully it's contained, but right now there was a spread in the last few months. I've been following it seriously. I hope nothing happens. Keep your vitamin D levels up. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I try to exercise and eat healthy, and that's the best I can do generally. Vaccines, I don't think you're gonna like this, but I think they need at least 10 years of development before they go public every time.
If not 10 years, you need a couple of years at least, right? Particularly with ones that we've already studied and utilized for a while. Right? So, for example, we developed a VLP, a virus-like particle, which has been around for a long time. Like the HPV vaccines that you have, Gardasil, for example. We've tested this method on millions and millions of people over a long period of time.
Haven't they had issues with that one?
Very minor issues, allergic reactions, right? Compared to what we've been seeing recently, it's nothing. Like 2 people got allergic reactions because of the adjuvant that was used, which is not a big deal. There's no genetic materials in there. It's protein being injected into your body. It's very relatively safe, right? With risk and reward, the reward is so much higher than the risk in this particular method. That's been used on millions. We've tested it, as opposed to genetic materials being inserted in the body. Or the inactivated viruses, we actually have to deal with live viruses and then inactivate them. That's another issue on its own, right? So there are safe versions of them out there. It's just sometimes not as economical for these large companies to use the safer versions. I think that's. I suggested that vaccines should be open source, and it pissed off a lot of people, including some governments who kind of.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always been skeptical of the government, like vaccine, healthcare, and even academia too. 3D printed construction maybe has some of the most ethical of all department in those. Like it has some of the best academics, some of the best companies, some of the best people in government involved, and still you see me on LinkedIn, I'm being pretty critical of them. I can
Yeah.
only imagine if I tried to cover healthcare or one of these other industries that are just like riddled with just like total everything's messed up, I would lose my mind.
You'd need antidepressants while you're doing it. And it's just it's strange. I think if there's one thing that should be open source is things that humanity in itself depends on for its survival. I don't think any company should be able to patent that or keep it in their pockets. Or that's the strangest thing that we just let this go. The survival of all of humanity is apparently dependent on these 2-3 things. Oh, that those 2 things belong to that company. What the hell is that? How does that even get by us? I don't understand, right? So,
but you can also argue without that, maybe they wouldn't put the money into it to create the solutions in the first place. So you don't. It's hard to say.
no, I think the solutions are not as complicated as they make it out to be. I think one of the problems we have with governments is they try to make the things that they produce a lot more complex than they actually are. So producing a vaccine, for example, at least in the animal stage, you just need $4 million, $5 million. They throw out big numbers, and it irritates me. So for example, they'll talk about building a drone. This drone costs $180 million. Come on, like that's $180 million of budget they want to take from you.
My $700 DJI drone is spectacular.
Right? So it doesn't cost that much. They like to exaggerate so that they need to launder their money. They can't be straightforward with all the costs and so forth. Though I assume it's not exactly that cheap either. There'll be a lot of hidden costs that I don't see, for example. But I think it's not as complex as they try to make it out to be. I think that's one of the ways that keeps the barrier of entry higher, so people don't enter the market.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's reasonable to have some time period where they get to profit off of it, but then after 10 years or 20 years or whatever, make it open and whatever the thing is.
Yeah, they can open source it, and with a promised government contract for the group who've made the big breakthrough to make let's say $1 billion. What the hell do they want? Make your $1 billion and piss off.
Never do is give the companies immunity. Like if they developed it and they want to release it, they have to take responsibility for their like product on the market. They can't be. The government shouldn't give them. That's crazy to give the company immunity on whether their product is good or not.
Yeah, unfortunately. Let's not get ourselves into trouble. Let's stick to 3D printed houses.
Yeah, for sure. 3D printed houses is definitely much more easy to wrap your head around. Less variables and less.
Yeah. So I have good news. I'm trying to build a roof with the 3D printer. That'll be the first of in this part of the world.
So will that be done in place, or will you print it and then lift it?
I want to do it in place.
Wow.
I might have to do it the other way, but I'm not sure. I'm trying to print it as a dome, almost, right?
But however you're going to do it, you're going to get it done.
It's the next project. It's a tiny one. I'm starting with 75 meters squared.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see if I can get that done. I think that'd be interesting. And what I'm also trying to do is I'm trying to decrease the weight of the material as we progress up, right? So that will be something interesting to look into. That's one. The second one is the adjustable nozzle, I guess. And I still haven't made the polar armed robot. I'm going to make one of those, hopefully. I'm really going to try the 4 or 5 floors, hopefully.
That should reduce your setup and disassembly time.
Definitely. Well, I guess, but the problem is that there's the polar has its own problem with coordination, right? It has its own problem with every time you move about, it's a headache. You have to make the bot understand where it is.
Yeah, we were talking about that same concept earlier. Like, if that's a huge step to give the bot self-awareness in real time.
Yeah, yeah. It'll be a bit difficult, but I think it's doable. And I think the problem will be the amount of errors we experience while we're trying to do this, rather than having like a laser setup. Shouldn't be too difficult, but reducing the errors, I guess.
Have you had any like benefit of any kind of like 3D printing organizations or communities that have helped you to kind of get to where you are today?
No, nobody helped us. No. We do. We 3D print schools for free. We do the charity part. We have a
Wow.
portion that we save for charity all the time. In fact, this project started which as a charity project. If you remember, like I went out to one of these places in this really hot place, and we were building a house, and basically one of my friends took me. There was like 50 something degrees, but I kicked the wall of the masonry wall. They hadn't put the rebar in place properly. I was like, "What the hell is this, man? You guys are gonna kill people like this, right? It's good for you that you want to do this for people. It's not good for those people, right?" Anyway, my friend searched up. He goes, "Oh, there's something called a 3D printer," and that's where the idea came on when we started
Wow.
building from there.
You kicked the wall and did it fall? Did it break?
Well, a part of it kind of, in all fairness, the mortar I think was not. It hadn't really gained strength, so, but still, this is much better. What do you think about the cold joints?
Most groups will do a dual bond epoxy to mitigate them. What are you doing?
I think the epoxy is definitely not going to do the job, considering the weight. But we have our structural setup comes from the columns. We have so many columns, right? So they are filled in at the end. So that gives it doesn't allow the cold joint any movement, right? I think
The
that's
temperature fluctuation, I think, impact like the cold joint is much worse if you have freezing thawing cycles.
agreed. Cracking's the same. Contrary to what people think, you have to cure the building more when it's cold. You think that when it's hotter you have to cure it more, but when it's colder you have to do it for another extra week. I think that's where we see most of the problems, the cracking.
And when you say cure for another extra week, before you do painting or before you, what does that week of waiting entail?
Well, before you want to put a roof on there,
Okay.
when the weather is hot, I think you can put a roof on, especially our roofs, which are light. In 3 to 4 days, we can do.
Wow.
We can. But generally shouldn't be doing that, right? Should be waiting your 7 days at least. But you can do it because our roofs are quite light. And also, if there are any cracks, that crack is gradually opening up, right? So you want to wait till it's opened up to its whatever amount it's going to be, and then put any load on it, right? Or paint it. The last thing you want to do, like we did in a couple of our projects, we painted and then we started seeing the cracks opening up, which wasn't fun. We also developed a little mix design to fill up. We open up the cracks fully with some fiber and some simple mix design with some expansive agent and fill it up, and then the problem's pretty much solved.
Nice. And then do you reform it to match the layers?
Yes, and then we kind of sand it out and reform it.
And you're leaving the layers exposed in the finished house?
We try to. Sometimes our print doesn't come out as good as we'd like. These 7 houses that we're building, they want bricks, which was like, I was like, come on, man, let me at least do 2 of them. I want to leave them exposed, but they wanted to do bricks, so I have to put bricks on them. That's what the customer wants. The last 2, I've got permission from them to just let me do my thing,
Nice.
and then later on they can add the bricks. But I think it's doable to have the sidings without sidings, just paint it. I think it's doable. So long as you have
personal preference.
and consistency, right, with the print. It's important.
I guess so. I would be very if I lived in a printed home, I don't think I would mind too much, but I'm a unique case.
I wouldn't mind. I'm building myself a home. I'm going to print myself
Oh,
a
that's
home.
great.
Yeah, definitely. I'll put a video up when I do.
Yeah, I don't know why no other 3D printed construction CEO is living in a 3D printed house. It's crazy.
Yeah, the only reason I'm not living in a 3D printer because where I am is Tehran, right? It's all high rises. There are no villas here, right? So I'm building one in another part of the city,
Nice.
or another city. But I want to experience it myself, and I think I'd be able to come up with a lot of things if you experience it firsthand.
Have you designed it yet?
I have a few rough designs, conceptual designs that the architect has done, but not at the stage where I'm happy. It's going to be about. It's not going to be a big house. It's going to be like 250 meters. It's not too big, nothing too serious.
That's fairly large for a 3D printed home. It's on the larger side of the homes that have been completed.
It'll be two floors, right? So 125, 125, something
Mhm.
like that.
And will it feature many unique design aspects that are only possible with 3D printing?
That's exactly what I'm aiming for. So I'm aiming for a few interesting designs there. Also in the garden, for example, I want to make the plants with the I don't know what you call it, the mold of the plants with a 3D printer. I'm
Very
making
cool.
seats. I'm going to make a table, a few tables with a 3D printer, maybe a little pool with a 3D printer, right? I wanted to make a little sauna. I'm not sure if that's even doable, possible, but I want to look into a steam room or sauna with a 3D printer. I saw an interesting design online, so hopefully I'll be able to build that, and also the walls, the exterior, the boundary walls. I want to make an interesting design.
Yeah,
I want to make everything with the printer, see what happens. It's worth the effort, I guess.
for sure. Yeah, that's going to be an amazing project. Hopefully, our next podcast episode can be from there. When do you think you might start that? In a year or two?
No, a year or two. I'm talking a couple of months. As soon as they give me permissions,
That's
the
great.
moment the moment they give me the permission, I'm going out and build it, right? And then it'll probably only take like a month or so to get all the
Wow.
work done. We're pretty
That's
quick.
wild.
We're pretty quick. The
I'm just be
four
blown away that's happening. Like, if you get started in 1 month and it's done in another month after that, that's the fastest I ever heard of. Like construction in America, it's 3 to 6 months of planning, and then 3 to 6 months of site work, and then 3 to 6 months of the next thing. It takes 3 years.
Oh no, this for us. If we're on, if it's a permissions that take some time. They'll take a couple of months for me. I assume might take a bit longer. But the moment I get that, the preparing the site is not too difficult. We really do get in and out if everything works fine. 100 square meters, we really do it in 3 days, 4 days. So it's doable. But then I've also noticed that 3 4 days means that your precision of your print layers are not as good as you'd like it to be. If you want to be dead precise, we take 6 days.
Are those double shift days or 3 shifts?
No, that's single shift, but 12 hours,
Okay.
right? 12 hours, including 10 hours of 9.5 hours of print, 10 hours of print. It takes a good hour to set everything up every day. You have to clean the rails. You have to make sure there's not too much dust around. You have to set up the extruder, make sure that your hose doesn't have any issues. Setting up the material itself is a process. It takes an hour there, and it takes a good hour and a half to clean everything at the end, right? But also, as I said, one of the things that people don't add into this process is the curing. The moment you end, this is where my headache starts. The moment you end your shift, your team is dead tired. The next team has to come and start curing it straight away. The first 3 hours are crucial. Without that, you've kind of messed up your entire, all the effort you made goes down the drain. But
The other
generally, I
issue
think, yeah.
that people never put into cost. Sorry, what were you going to say? It's much better to finish that point.
I've lost that. I forgot. Nothing important. I'm done. So it's 6 days. I think you can come up with decent walls with your utility recessed walls ready, with the lintels, everything set up, with your foam work for the roofing done. 6 days. I think you can do a decent job for 100 meters. This 250 meters, you look at 12 days. And the good part about the curing is we do it layers at a time. You get 50 centimeters or whatever amount you get. right? You've already cured the lower layers in the first few days, right? And as you progress, you don't have to spend too much time before you can, put the roof on as well. That's why I
Yeah,
was saying.
makes sense. Best case scenario, everybody shows up, nobody gets sick, the weather's good.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly. But that usually never happens. Just so you know. The other thing people don't take into consideration is wind. I think wind is the most difficult aspect of printing. You go to the bathroom, you dry your hands. That's what the world is doing to the concrete at that point. So it evaporates all the water, right? The CER goes off the roof, and then you can't print. And also, you have vibrations after 30 kilometers per hour. I've seen 30 something kilometers. Then you start getting vibrations in your printer as well for the gantry. Where the polar system, I assume, like a little bit of wind comes they'd be a bit shaky. But have you seen anything from them?
Which company? Just any polar system?
Any polar system. I don't want to take any companies.
I haven't seen many printing above 8 feet, and the few examples like Icon wants to do the Phoenix printer, they're having to develop a laser adjusted system to compensate for there's so much sway. But I have a great video coming out today of a company with a robotic arm printing 20 feet in the air. Hopefully, it comes out right after this podcast. I can release it. Huge client, really awesome project.
Look forward to it. So you haven't seen any vibration issues at 8 feet?
At 20 feet, they were not having vibration issues. They were able to round the corner at 190 centimeters per second, or no, 190 millimeters per second, and have no wobble, no apparent wobble. I got pretty close to the drone, but you'll see the corners in the video. It's usually tight corners have wobble on a polar system, because if you're trying to do a 90-degree angle, changing the acceleration just makes a little wobble. But theirs was very low.
That's impressive. I'd like to have a look at that.
The thing I was going to mention before, most people don't put in the cost of your time. So you're the CEO of all these different companies, and your time realistically might be worth $1,000 an hour. And so when you're going on site yourself that night, doing a little bit of recon work, spending 1 hour on site that day, 2 hours on site that day, and then the other day, you're not billing your time on that site. But when you're there, the value you're adding is probably enormous chunks of like value. It's very important that you are there for that time, and it's not being calculated in the cost of the project.
Yeah, it's not. I'm more of a hands-on guy. The value that I add is I'm able to make decisions very quickly because all the costing is the cost is on me at the end of the day. When you have other people trying to make those decisions, there's always a bit of fear. So I'm a big risk taker. So I'll quickly make the decisions and move forward. But yeah, that's usually not counted. And I've become more of a receptionist than anything else. It's startups. It's you gotta run around a bit.
Like for example, if you take the CEO of Lennar and put Lennar CEO on just one home, and he's watching them build that one home for Lennar, they'll probably build it in half the time at half the cost of any other home.
Usually, the first few homes though I have a good team now. I have a very good team. But when I'm there, obviously things happen a lot quicker.
That's why it's so hard to compare the numbers, because you get the numbers with it's somebody's passion project. So it's not like 1,000 homes with a public company where they're trying to return a dividend to somebody whose time is worth way more than they're billing it for, is putting in countless hours, heart, labor, blood, sweat, tears, and it's not in the balance sheet.
That is true, but this time around with these 7 houses, apart from a few of the houses, I stayed there to make sure that there's no glitches and nobody can complain about any issue. But then I let them do their thing, and it worked. I think a lot of it has to do with just setting up processes, and error handling.
Yeah, I agree.
If you speed that up, I think this shouldn't be. It's doable, so long as the software is user friendly, which ours is not as user friendly as we'd like it to be.
Are you seeing innovations on the lightweight concrete side? So the way you're manufacturing the panels, or is that improving as well?
We've improved. We tested a set of materials. So concrete 2,300 density, right? Which we came up with one which was 1,700. 1,700. So it was about 25% lighter. I still want that, extra 100, 150 down. So we've made some progress there, and that's one of the things I'm really going to target next. I'm really interested. I think that's going to be the next breakthrough. We reduce our cement as well with that as well. So
And what's
we've
the cement?
actually
Is that like 15%?
it's more than 15%. I wish it was 15%, but it's a bit more. We've had mixed designs with zero cement. So that's also doable. But then when you do that, it's a supply chain. Like you can do it for fun, you can do it for a test, but when you want to build a house and you need tons of that material, it's not readily available yet. Right?
Fly ash and slag.
Fly ash, slag, yeah, it's a few others, right?
I
So
don't know if those are going to be readily available much more than they are today ever.
yeah, that's an issue. I have no expertise in that about their supply chain. So um,
One comes from coal and one comes from steel.
yeah,
I don't know much about it either, but it's just a byproduct. The weird thing about it is they put there's all these CO2 emissions, and I don't understand any of that stuff. It all goes over my head. In my opinion, I think there's probably way more to what's important in the environment than just CO2. It's probably a complicated thing with a lot of factors. But they make CO2 an important calculation for all these grants and money everywhere. And they say that fly ash and slag is zero CO2 when it's a byproduct of
cool.
iron and coal, which is all the CO2 is getting attributed to the iron and coal. So they're disincentivizing people from using the core ingredients. And then they have this, what was previously a waste product, but is now something people are worried about the supply chain for. They're like, oh, I wish we could get more of this stuff. They had attributed no waste generation to it when it's really 30 times. If you were to produce it just for the fly ash or the slag, it's 30 times more emissions than the coal or the iron itself.
I agree. The problem you have is the people making the laws, right, have almost zero education. I wouldn't let some of these people be my doorman, let alone making laws for the whole country, right? So that's the problem we have, and there's deals that are made in this whole process. Though I'm completely ignorant of CO2 emissions, I don't have any expertise in the field, but I don't think some of the issues are quite obvious, like you're mentioning. It's just it doesn't make any sense. Like the batteries, like electric cars. Though I'm not against electric cars fully, but it's not like there's no materials that are depleting from this earth with making these batteries. So I don't understand the idea behind this one blanket solution for a multivariable problem that they constantly come up with, and then they market
Yeah.
it.
I
But then
used to have the battery with nickel and cobalt in the Tesla long range all wheel drive, but I just upgraded to the rear wheel drive long range that has more range and a longer lifespan. And it's just lithium ion. So it's lithium, I think sulfur, but no cobalt, no nickel.
well, I think it's good to have it as part of the market, but to assume that that's going to solve our problem, I think it's a little bit exaggerated. The
Yeah.
whole issue is exaggerated. It's also fun. I like electric cars personally. I had one. I just sold it, but I think the problem is more of an exaggeration. The issue is more of an exaggeration. It's more of become a marketing gimmick for some people, I guess.
Do you like cars?
I used to like cars. I'm too old now. I don't care what I drive now, so long as I get my work done.
What was the most fun car you ever drove or owned?
Well, I've played around with the Lambo for a bit, but it's fun for a little while. But you get bored of these things. You
You have to
realize
run road
life,
trips.
yeah, life is about other things. It's quite. I told you that I have this chart. I have this chart of 70 years. That's my life. The first 20 years I've cut off, right? Because I was not useful then. And up to last 5 years, 65 to 70, let's just assume, I'm not going to be that useful. So I calculate my life from 40 to 65. That's it. That's all I have remaining. Every year I cut off a box. And then I have this line saying that, okay, what can I potentially, what if I die quicker? I want to be able to reach this. If not, then this. If not, then this. Whether that's personal, family, or work, right? That helps me keep things in perspective. I
Yeah, I
don't,
feel
I think the open-ended question of how long we'll live is one of the most detrimental things to human beings because it's depressing to think about the idea that we have a limited life. But when you put that into perspective, you realize the limited time you have, You try to build your relations correctly. You try to work correctly. It just changes your perspective to life. I think it's been one of the most helpful things for me. I have this chart stuck on the wall. I see it every time, and then every time I don't achieve something on a birthday, I write some note to myself and try to figure things out for the next year.
Not everybody who's self-employed takes this approach, but I think both you and I can say that we spend every day doing what we want to do. So like we wake up and it's what do I want to work on today, and that's what you get to work on. It's a beautiful and fortunate position to be in. I'm super grateful.
It's beautiful. Unfortunately, it's also a curse, right? Because you lose time with your family sometimes. But other than that, I love it. You couldn't. I hate holidays sometimes. So my family will probably get upset with this, but holidays become like okay, my mind is somewhere else half the time. If that
I
can be
skip every
balanced,
holiday.
sorry.
I skip every holiday for the past 4 years.
Yeah, I wish I could, but my employees they need their holidays. They take it.
Well, you have kids too, right?
Yeah, it's,
You got to spend time with them. I don't have kids yet. Hopefully, I'm not contributing to the depopulation problem, and I can have kids someday, but not yet.
what
So I can skip holidays.
when you have kids, that's like the next phase of life. Your
Very important.
worldview changes completely. You realize how insignificant you are at the same time, while at the same time it's very enjoyable. It's a pain and misery plus a realization all at the same time, which opens up this whole new set of motivations that you didn't have before.
I take a very long-term perspective on everything, and so people that don't have kids are basically just a blip on Earth that are here and gone. So they basically, if you don't have kids, you don't exist, and I'm in that category right now.
You'll have kids. It's yeah, you're right with that. Yeah, you're right with that. But with this kind, sometimes you also think that what kind of world am I bringing children into? Sometimes it's like in the back of my mind, like, oh my god, this place is becoming more difficult to digest. The more I see things, the more I live here. So, but
Yeah,
I think it's been happening for millennia. So,
I love the time that we live in because it's so like accessible. Like there was some kid in India who built a nuclear some fission something from ChatGPT. He was just like by himself with the internet, and so like the resources available, the people that are there's less people maybe working hard than before, but the people who are working hard have like all this. You can order any sensor part, whatever you want, shipped to you, and you can get like they have everything is basically like $10 or $20 shipped from China for like you wait a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, however long it takes, and like
yep.
everything is just at our fingertips.
Just if there's depopulation, right? This will no longer be available to us. A lot of things will change. That's what I was talking about. This 10-minute shipping, this etc. There's a lot of people behind. Even when we talk about automation, okay, a robot is lifting this up and putting it there, but there's somebody watching over that thing. That process is being watched over still by a human. And when we
Yeah,
have a shortage, a dramatic shortage of population, then things will change dramatically. We will not have the luxuries that we do right now. Just
it's still
imagine
important to automate. Maybe more important to automate than
it will be more important for sure. Uh, but like, think about it. If something goes wrong, you need a repairman. How many of them do you think will be around? Right? Unless you have bots repairing everything, which is it's a bit of a dream at this stage. It might happen, but you know, I think that's what we're going to be missing. But it's an interesting time to live in. I think we're going to see a very dramatic change with AI soon. And I think, unfortunately, as depressing as this may sound, a virus is going to wipe out a portion of the population. And then we'll be starting from this new uh, generation or this new population, which may have to start off with a lot of data missing, considering everything is digital right now.
yeah. It's definitely fascinating. Have you done any food startups, food businesses?
I wanted to start with farming, but I just need to complete one or two projects. I need to get a few of these projects running on their own, so it doesn't require so much of my time. Right now, sometimes I have to micromanage, which is very irritating. Once I get out from there, I really want to work on water savings and
Yeah.
farming, but that will be in a couple of years' time. And that's
When I
it.
think crisis or depopulation or any of that stuff, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need water, food, shelter, community, self actualization. And so if you can automate each one of those things in that order, then you're in pretty good shape.
That's the entire, the vision of our organization, right? It's to use innovation and technology, right, to either make primary needs essentially accessible or reduce their prices by means of the innovation. So we always have a large market segment, um, but it's challenging sometimes to achieve the reduction in prices or accessibility, right?
I'm interested in farming, specifically farming in a method that doesn't have any kind of like chemicals or microplastics at any point of the construction process. I'd like to have like a microplastic free diet for 2 years before I have kids.
Yeah, it's dirt cheap in this part of the world. Anytime you decide to do something, let me know. We could get a piece of land and test a whole bunch of things. I'd
But
love to
then
do that.
I need the food and I'm hungry here.
Oh, we'll do the testing. Send you over the stuff. Tech, you can do it over there after that, right? The R&D in this part of the world is cheap. That's something I really think it's necessary to look into. Imagine like these people, these large organizations which have these supercomputers with the AI, and all of a sudden they decide to cut us off from the data that's available to us right now. Things will change. I wouldn't put it too far past them.
I'm doing a little bit of testing. I'll show you after this call, but it's not for the subscribers yet, so they're going to have to wait. But it's been really awesome talking to you, and I think that people are really going to appreciate this conversation. You have a really uncommon level of transparency and honesty for a lot of the people I've talked to in this industry. A lot of people saying faster, cheaper all the time. You've really shown like the some of the challenges you face and also some of the benefits of you've seen competing technologies, and also you're working with the lightweight concrete. So you're really have an awesome perspective. Thank you so much for everything you shared today.
Been a pleasure, Jared. Been a pleasure.